Melfred Forsman grew up in Iowa Falls. After finishing school, Melfred joined the Navy in 1939. Melfred was assigned to the USS Houston, a 600-foot, 9,000-ton vessel. In February of 1942, the USS Houston and a crew of 1,000 battled a Japanese task force in the Java Sea near the Sundern Straits. In an 8-hour battle, the USS Houston, struck by bombers and torpedoes, sank, taking at least 700 of her crew with her. This is part of Melfred's story.
Where you lived and your occupation prior to enlistment?
Well, I lived in Iowa Falls, Iowa, and went to school there. My father worked in a railroad there, and I joined the Navy in 1939 and took my basic training in Great Lakes, Illinois, with a group of other individuals from around my hometown there.
Can you give us a brief outline of your military career prior to your capture? Where you joined, and then kind of a short synopsis of where you got until you got captured.
Well, I went aboard the Houston in Bremerton, Washington in 1939, in August 1939. And I was in the deck force at that time. And then we went from Bremerton to Hawaii. And I think we spent about 11 months in Hawaii, and then came back to the States and had some work did at Mare Island, which is in San Francisco Bay. And then we went back to Hawaii, and then from there we went out to duty in the Asiatics in Manila, was our home base, and we become the flagship of the Asiatic fleet. And then from there on, once the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, of course, we were informed of that over the loudspeakers and so forth, and we immediately went into battle conditions. And from there we started doing some convoy duty and out through the islands and down to Australia, and went through several air raids where aircraft coming in at us. At one time I think there was 4 waves of 9 aircraft in a wave, or maybe more than that. There's 50-some aircraft altogether, coming from all directions and everything, and they never had a lot of near misses and so forth, but one bomb did land on the Houston, and we lost 40-some personnel from that. And then we fought along with other Allied ships, which was Dutch ships and English ships and Australian ships in the Java Sea battle against the Japanese, which was probably the first major battle against the Japanese in the start of the war. And then we were, well, I guess we were outnumbered, but anyway, we lost most of our task force and most of our fighting ships, except the Houston and the Perth. The Perth was an Australian cruiser, and so we went and fueled, and then we started back. We were going to Australia. We were going to go through Sunda Straits, and when we got to Sunda Straits, well, the Japanese were making a landing, and of course they had all kinds of ships there. I mean, they had a whole full task force, and we got bottled up in the Thunder Straits. That was our last battle, Thunder Strait.
So that's where the USS Houston was sunk.
Pardon?
That's where it was sunk.
Yes, that's where it sunk. I was on a 5.38 anti-aircraft gun, 5-inch gun.
When you were all given the order to abandon ship, can you kind of bring us up a little bit to? I'm assuming you made it all the way to Java, right? Where did you get captured?
Well, they gave the order to abandon ship, and I got ready to go over the side, and then they give the order to man your battle stations again. So, and then they give the second order to abandon ship. So I went over the side then with a friend of mine, but as soon as I got over the side, I lost him. But I'd always heard that you need to get away from the ship as soon as possible, which I did. And of course the Japanese were still firing on the ship. And so I was with myself for a while, and I run onto several rafts, but they were loaded. And I could hear machine gun fire too, which I figured, well, the Japanese were machine gunning people. So I tried to not get up with a big group or anything. And so then a friend of mine, I seen him in the water, and we swam together for a while, and then all of a sudden he disappeared, and I don't know what happened to him. And then I run across two other people, and we finally made it to shore after, somewhere between 16 and 18 hours, I'm not really sure. But we made it to shore. There was a terrific riptide there. But I'd always been a strong swimmer, but we finally made it. A man by the name of Forrester, and one by the name of Netter, and myself. And as soon as we made it into where we could stand up, the Japanese jumped out of the bushes and trained their rifles on us. So they were waiting for us to get to shore, I guess.
Let me ask you, at this moment, that you knew you were already captured, can you recall what your emotions were, your feelings at that time?
My emotions were, well, it's hard to say. I was so waterlogged, my tongue was swollen up, the word held my mouth open, and I had the attitude I really didn't care. I mean, I had a sheath knife, which I carried with me, and which I used that to cut off my pants leg and my shirt sleeve while I was in the water because they were rubbing me raw. And so when I first got into shore, I was in the coral there, and I pulled the sheath knife out and stuck it in the coral. And my thoughts were, well, if they're going to cut my throat down, I'm going to use my knife. So anyway, I really wasn't that worried. I mean, I wasn't terrified or anything like that.
How old were you when you were captured?
How old was I? I had turned 19.
Immediately after you were captured by this group of Japanese, were you interrogated there at that moment or just a little bit afterwards?
Well, shortly after that, they interrogated me. And of course, we'd always been told, name, rank, and serial number, so that's all I told them.
But what kind of questions did they ask?
Well, they asked me where I went to school, and if I had a mother and father, and where they lived, and if I had any brothers or anything like that, and what ship I was from. And of course, I told them what ship I was from, but they didn't believe it because they had sunk us I don't know how many times before that. And just general questions. They didn't really ask anything that was of a secret nature or anything like that, which I didn't know anything anyway.
From there, what prison camp were you taken to?
Well, they took me into a place where they interrogated me. We had to pull what they call dog carts up an asphalt highway, and of course it blistered the bottom of our feet, the hot asphalt, and took us into a place called Sarabaya, us were put in a theater and just sitting on the floors, and they had machine guns lined up around there. And we didn't get hardly anything to eat. I got one little piece of meat one day, and no way of cooking it or anything like that. You just ate it raw. And one time a small rice ball. And then they transferred me to a jail. And that was as bad as the theater because it was real crowded, probably about 3 times the amount of people in the cell that normally held, you know.
This was like a regular jail for criminals.
Yeah, this is a regular jail. And from there, then I was taken into what they call the bicycle camp in Batavia. No, was that Batavia or Sarabia?
It was Batavia.
Yeah, Batavia. And there, conditions improved while we were in Batavia. I might add that at first we had regular Japanese troops as guards, and of course everybody received a certain amount of bashing and everything because we couldn't understand them, and being as we couldn't understand them, well, they'd knock you around a little bit. You had to stand at attention, you had to bow to them, and they had every now and then they would have what they called a tinkle. So we learned how to count in Japanese real fast, because if you messed up counting, well, then they'd bash you around. So everybody learned how to count. And the food improved while we were in there in the bicycle camp. It wasn't real nutritious food or anything like that, but there was a little bit more food than what we were used to getting.
Were you interrogated at that time when you were at the jail cell or you were at bicycle camp?
I was what?
Were you interrogated at that time again?
Yes, we were interrogated again, yes. And also, they wanted us to sign a letter pledging that we would not escape and so forth like that. And we wouldn't sign it. We were informed by the officers not to sign it. And then they had all the officers stand at attention and so forth, and through the heat of the day and what have you. And finally, they said, well, go ahead and sign it because we were doing it under duress. So everybody signed it with the knowledge that it really didn't mean anything as far as we were concerned.
And what camp were you taken from there then? From the bicycle camp?
Where was I taken then? I was with what they call the first group, Fitzsimmons group, going out of there. And we went to Singapore first. And then, I don't remember how many days we spent in Singapore, and then we left there and went by ship again to Rangoon, and then up to Malmin, Burma. And there, we started on a work program there, building a railroad called the Death Railway from Burma to Bangkok, Thailand. And might add that in this ship we were down in the holds on the ship, and of course crowded also. They had decks built in the holds, but you couldn't stand up in them. You had to sit in them. I mean, they wasn't tall enough to sit in. Of course, it was insufferably hot, and very little water, very little food. And they did have latrine facilities, but they were up on the deck, so consequently everybody tried to go up, you know, once in a while, and they were just makeshift deals that kind of set over the side of the ship. And but that was a bad experience there, because you didn't know whether you was going to make it or not. There a lot of people had dysentery, and of course a lot of people had malaria. So there's a lot of suffering going on there.
So you made it eventually to which camp in Burma?
Camp?
Yeah, what camp?
I was in practically all the camps up through on the railroad. I moved from one camp to another camp. And
you work up as the railroad work progressed, you went up the line.
Yeah, as it progressed, and we made cuttings in the side of mountains and stuff, built bridges. It's just unbelievable at the type of work we did, and without the help of big machinery or anything, it's just plain hand tools and stuff like that. And made cuttings probably 40, 50 feet deep and probably 150 feet long, you know, through the side of mountains. Built bridges that were 50, 60 feet high and probably 100 feet long out of lumber from the jungle and everything. And everything was did by hand. It was as far as I'm concerned, it was an engineering feat that, you know, was unbelievable.
Let me ask you, let's go a little bit into it. First, let me ask you, what was, during this time period, did the Japanese provide any medical treatment to you or any of the others if you needed it?
Did they what?
Medical treatment?
Medical treatment was non-existent. Most of your medical treatment was what you give yourself. We had several doctors that were tried, but they didn't have the medicines or anything. They had no antibiotics or anything like that. We had a Dr. Hecking with us, and of course he was able to pick herbs out of the jungle and so forth, which he did make some progress as far as tropical ulcers and stuff like that. Out of our group that he had, we lost nobody to tropical ulcers, which a lot of the groups lost people from that. Malaria, now once in a while they get run across quinine trees and they take the bark and he'd boil it, and then you drink the juice for malaria. Also stomach problems like dysentery and stuff like that, pinworms and whatever. We would take charcoal from the campfires. We'd have campfires, and a lot of the campfires were to keep the animals out of the camp, the wild animals, because it was right in the jungle. We'd take the charcoal and powder it up and take it, and it in turn, the abrasive action of it would tend to clean your intestine walls and so forth out, which helped as far as the dysentery was concerned. And then of course a lot of them had beriberi, which was and different other things, which vitamin deficiencies and malnutrition. Of course, this was later on in camp. At first, most everybody was in fairly good health, especially the sailors, because the sailors were, well, I'm not saying they were stronger, but you know, they were probably performed more activities and stuff aboard ship than somebody sitting in a day room or land or something like that, you know. But most of them, I was in excellent health when I first went in there.
In some of the camps you were in the various progress of the railroad, can you spend a little bit of time talking about the living conditions, you know, description of the barracks, sleeping quarters, food, sanitation, equipment or materials the Japanese would give you?
Well, the camps, the huts that you stayed in were just made out of bamboo and hadap. So they really didn't keep the weather out. And during the rainy seasons, things would get really bad during rainy season because they had a terrific rainfall over there in the rainy season. And everything turned to mud, quagmire, and a lot of times the food would be very sparse because of us advancing up the railroad. The supplies wouldn't keep up with you. And then the Japanese, of course, you're working long hours, and then they'd want to speed up, and they'd go to what they call a speedo phase, and then you'd work anywhere from 16 hours a day, sometimes 18 hours, and you'd work all through the rain and the mud and mosquitoes and sandflies and what have you. It was really miserable, and but the American people fared real good because they were very close, and I think the being close, you kind of paired up, you know, 2 or 3 of you kind of buddy together, and you'd take care of each other. And the bashings, the beatings and stuff like that, you had to watch yourself real close, because anytime that they'd find an excuse to knock you around, well, they would. And also the fact that at that time, too, on the railroad, we got Korean guards instead of Japanese, and they were worse than the Japanese were.
What kinds of food did you receive?
Mostly rice. That was the basic thing was rice. I remember the first rice I got, it had weevils in it, and they were little worms, and I'd sit there pushing them off to the side. And later on, well, I got to where I'd just find a dark corner to sit in and eat them. So by the time you got the weevils out, you didn't have much left.
So your basic stable, your basic diet, even though it was supplemented with a few little things here and there, it was basically rice.
Basically rice. Once in a while, the Japanese would have fish or something like that, and they would give us the heads, and the cooks would make we had our own cooks and everything. Everything was issued to them raw bulk, and we had they'd get these fish heads, and then they'd make a kind of a stew out of the fish heads, and then once in a great while, I don't know, maybe not over 3 or 4 times while I was in there, we did get some meat, and some of that was real bad, spoiled. I mean, but that way, the cooks, some way or another, they cleaned it up and cooked it, and then a lot of the leaves and stuff like that in the jungle were edible also, which they'd cook up some greens, you know, and we'd have that. And but as far as the food and everything, the food up through the jungle was real poor. It was just a minimum. I put it that way. Just enough to sustain you.
You mentioned earlier about working on the railroad, the various things that you did working for the railroad. Were there any other kind of work details that you participated in besides railroad work?
Any what?
Any other different kinds of work details besides the railroad work?
No, that's all I ever did. I worked on the railroad. Well, we hauled supplies, like they'd bring a train in and they'd have supplies like sleepers and rails and stuff like that. We'd offload them. Or
so basically your work was consistently working on the railroad.
Most of it built, yeah.
Ferrule detail.
Making cuttings and also building bridges. There was 3 of us, a boy by the name of Whopper and Grice and myself. When we'd line up for a work detail in the morning, we'd always try to get a pick. And the reason we did that is because you had a certain amount, each group had a certain amount of so many meters, square meters of soil they had to remove, or rock, or whatever it was, you know, a day. So we'd get a pick, and then we'd get next to each other, and we'd start picking, and we'd get a big hunk off. Well, while the other people were shoveling it up and hauling it out, we could rest, see. So we'd grab a pick every morning if we could, you know, because that way we got rest periods in there. So.
you occupy at the time?
No, about the only thing you did is you had quite a bit of freedom in certain camps because you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't escape or anything like that. They caught several people that did escape, and they executed them. Not Americans, but they were Australian. In the camp itself, generally, by the time you got into camp, well, it was dark, and you try to figure out some way of getting extra food. And of course, there was natives in the jungle, and you try to trade or barter with them. Some of the people had, well, the army personnel, when they come in, had all of their uniforms and stuff like that, which they graciously shared with the sailors, which didn't have nothing. And you'd get a shirt or a pair of shorts or something like that, and trade it to the natives for maybe a couple of duck eggs or what they call a caddy of sugar. It was hard, real hard sugar. And then you'd hoard it and just take a little at a time, you know, and eat it. And whatever, you'd run across wild limes and also peppers in the jungle, and we'd get that. And one time we got a caribou, which is a water buffalo, and we got it in the camp and butchered it and had it. And of course, everybody got dysentery then from eating that rich food. And then another time we stole a pig from the Japanese and butchered it and had it. And anytime we could steal from the Japanese, we stole from them.
Talking about that, let's jump a little bit to the guard. How could you describe the treatment that you received from the guard? Both Japanese and Korean. What kind of treatment?
How can you what?
What kind of treatment did you receive from the Japanese and the Korean guard?
The Japanese wasn't that bad. The Japanese were, well, there was a few that bashed you around, but a lot of them were frontline troops, and they wasn't as sadistic, that's what I have to say, as the Korean guards were. The Korean guards were always hunting for an excuse to get somebody to beat them. Or sometimes they'd take and put you in front of the guardhouse and make you kneel with a bamboo pole between you in the back of your knees, and they'd cut off all the circulation in your legs. Or they'd beat you with bamboo poles.
That was the type of punishment that they used to enforce the rules.
Pardon?
I said that was the type of punishment that they used to enforce the rules.
That was one of the types.
What other?
Or they'd hit you around and knock you down. And they were, if you begged for mercy or groveled or anything like that toward them, they'd give it to you worse. But if they knocked you down, if you just got back up and stood there, 9 chances out of 10, they'd give up real fast. They'd say, I don't know, maybe they just figured, well, you had guts enough to stand up.